denizens of the night. Welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Broadcasting live from the dark shadows of a dimly lit hotel suite, I will be your guide through the witching hours. Tonight, we'll hear the strange tale of an elderly wedding crasher and how someone among the wedding party ends up missing some digits and a tongue. That puts the movie Wedding Crashers to shame. This story is called The Night of Years and was written by Darren Todd.
The old man showed up too late to interrupt Lily and Andy's ceremony. Maybe he meant to speak now, after the pastor called for that bloated moment of silence, asking for any reason they couldn't be joined in matrimony and all that. But then he got stuck in the god-awful San Diego traffic. It happens. So he had to content himself with ruining the reception in the church gardens. Even then, he might have wanted to pull me or another groomsman aside and quietly request an audience with Andy. Instead, during the punch and hors d'oeuvres mingle, he leaned too hard against the cake table and sent all 3 layers sliding toward him. He didn't panic, at least, and tried tipping it back level as every eye in the place whipped around to spectate. If the newlyweds had gone with a fondant coating, it might have survived. But despite the old man putting out a hand to stop it, that cake parted like the Red Sea, covering his pant legs in vanilla frosting. The cake crumb cascaded around him, forming an exorbitantly expensive pitcher's mound. And boy, did he throw a curveball. "That's my wife!" the old man said, and stomped out of the cake as if trudging through snow. And then he slipped, as older folks often do, the $1,000 worth of sugar and flour doing little to break his fall. By the time the groomsmen had run to the rescue, myself included, the old man was literally snoring. Who knows why I did it, but in hindsight, perhaps I'd already suspected something off about Lily, enough to consider this intrusion only 95% a surprise. So while Pete, Andy's other best friend and the reason Andy chose his brother for best man, was busy triaging the old man's injuries, I noticed one liver-spotted hand and its bony fingers clutching an object. Something small, like when my 4-year-old son would play Guess Which Hand, but with no ability to disguise even a gumball without a bulge making the correct guess obvious. Of course, with my son, I'd guess wrong on purpose. But here the old man presented only one option. The other hand was open, fingers splayed, as you'd expect for someone who'd fallen. But down by my knees as I leaned over him was the balled-up hand, thin digits like the pneumatic legs of a dead spider, curled and akimbo. Even unconscious, and even though they were little more than swollen joints, bones, and diaphanous skin, the fingers opened slowly and with an uncomfortable amount of effort on my part. He might have crashed my best friend's wedding, but I wasn't about to go snapping the old-timer's fingers for it. When the fist finally opened, Pete had moved from his conspicuous evaluation of the old man's head to checking his free hand for a pulse. Pete's gaze turned skyward as he slathered on the pseudo-doctor vibe. But as such, he missed me prizing what looked like wadded-up scraps of paper from those rictus digits. By now, members of the wedding party and several of the guests had come over, creating a cacophony of delayed gasps. With it arrived a miasma of scents, coming together in something between floral and the cloying soap smell that seems to haunt all church-going crowds. I doubt any of them would have even noticed a groomsman holding wadded paper in his hands. Far more tantalizing fare pulled their gazes to the old man, who'd made his own marital claim before carrying on the long tradition of wedding fails by eating pavement. Nonetheless, I stuffed the paper into the pocket of my rented tuxedo pants. The old man went from snoring to moaning by the time Lily had uplifted her wedding dress and trotted over to survey the situation. That she would take charge seemed a safe assumption, given that over the 5 months of their courtship, I'd witnessed her trump card more than a few times. Once, pulling Andy homeward after a single drink with 5 of our friends, after she decided that boys' night should look more like boys' afternoon. And people assume a bride-driven agency at weddings, don't they? Guests safely and automatically submit to the bride's will, perhaps in fear of ruining her big day. "All right, everyone, just settle down and please return to your tables," she said. "It looks like we won't be enjoying much cake." Experimental light laughter rose and fell. "But I'll make sure the servers come around and freshen up your drinks before we begin dinner." Then, 2 beats at once. Someone from the circle of onlookers shout-whispered, "He said you were married," over Lily's right shoulder. In that same moment, Lily looked down at the old man. The morbid delight on the whisperer's face betrayed her schadenfreude, cheeks as flush as the fuchsia of her dress, which flagged her as a bridesmaid. But Lily's face. First, the slight downturn of her lips at the corners on hearing a jab from her bridesmaid. But then, for just a second, recognition. But of which? The face or the accusation? Perhaps both. But where recognizing the old man should have turned that partial frown into an O of exposure, what I can only call a dark flicker manifested instead. A blend of features we've all spotted in someone's face at one time or another, and which we know instinctively to flee from. As ingrained in us as the electric shock of seeing a snake where we'd seen only leaves a second before. Then her smile reappeared. If I hadn't spotted those few frames of something else, I'd have believed its genuineness. But a seed of horror took root, sown by that flicker behind her composure. Now she turned somber as the groomsmen lifted the old man up and out of the mess into the dark recesses of a nearby all-purpose room. Then, back to playing the light-hearted hostess, she squatted down and dipped a finger into the ruined cake, tasted it, and offered a thumbs up for approval to laughter and applause. At dinner, I'd be sitting up front, with the best man and 3 other groomsmen shouting distance to the bride and groom. Even then, why would anyone care if I spread out those papers? Examining them might explain away why, for just a second, Lily hadn't really been Lily, at least not the one we'd come to know. Well, maybe that other Lily would care. The owner of those slitted eyes, that sneer, nostrils open and wrinkled, brows creased as a washboard road. Perhaps she would find such distraction of particular interest. I had other excuses for keeping the papers hidden. One burden of sharing a best friend is that the competition offers ever-ready criticism. Surely I had my own microaggressions that best friend number 2, or perhaps he was number 1 and I was number 2, found grating. But Pete's aggression of choice had always been surfing my shoulder like a schoolmarm, exposing whatever held my attention, no matter its profound dullness or equally profound curiosity. The scraps of an old man who, intentional or not, had rendered the wedding cake single serving? certainly qualified. Examining that prize was not a Nancy Drew moment I felt inclined to share with Pete, even if I held an intense fondness for the guy. It would take him mere seconds to publicize the origins of the old man's fistful of missives, and the small but lingering terror of other Lily told me to keep their contents secret. Sure, the papers could just as well have been a CVS receipt. But if I ever decided to claim marriage to a bride on her wedding day, I wouldn't do so palming meaningless scraps of paper. No, it would be important. So solving that mystery would have to wait for at least a little privacy, sorely missing for any wedding party. Coupled with a delightful meal in 4 courses and a few gin and tonics, I'd begun to relax and grow adept at side-pocketing that mental image of Lily when it cropped up. And I'd almost forgotten about that wad of paper when the cops came in tandem with an ambulance to collect the old man. An officer approached Lily, and she displayed the perfect blend of pity, good humor, and appreciation. Perhaps I'd imagined the awful mirror of such a woman. Surely. Inside an hour, the old man was on his way to the hospital without an additional word with any guests, let alone the bride or groom. All that remained of the interloper's bold declaration lingered in quiet conversations that grew quieter still as the night went on. His intrusion diminished to little more than a misunderstanding once the spirits, God love the Catholics, began to flow in earnest. For some, the message had already twisted into hearsay, like the ever-garbling mantra in a children's game of telephone. One couple swore he said he was looking for his wife, perhaps assuming dementia. Another, that it hadn't been, "That's my wife," but "fuck my life," uttered before slamming his hands down on the cake table in something like a social media prank. I mean, we all knew Lily had been married before, and to an older guy, but he was supposed to be dead. Years dead. His estate seating what had become Lily's rather successful auction house. Even if whispers of gold digger might have come up during poker games Andy begged off of, the jest was clear. If anyone was marrying up, it was Andy. The guy worked as hard as anyone, but VBA programmers had a ceiling, and he'd hit it sometime around the dominion of the BlackBerry. Had been spinning his wheels, happy as a clam, ever since. "It's so great to see our boy happy," Pete said. Apparently, the booze had given him psychic powers, reading my inner thoughts in real time. "Happy as a clam," I answered. "You drinking?" he asked. I held up my 4th gin and tonic, largely untouched. The ice had already melted, despite the pleasant May dusk settling around us. When had I slowed down? More importantly, what would my inevitable sobering up do to Lily's face as my eyes inevitably flicked her way? "What do you think about that guy?" Pete asked. "The DJ?" Pete pushed out a breathy huff, the flecks of spittle almost missing me. "The old guy," he said, and leaned in close. "Lily's hubs from the sound of it." I felt the wad of paper in my pants pocket then, as if it had swelled at the mention of its former owner. "I think we know Lily's husband rather well." I pointed at Andy, swinging his arms alongside Lily in the center of a makeshift dance floor. "And he's younger than both of us." Pete shrugged. "By a year. We felt sorry for him back at school. Now he's often gotten married before me," he grunted, as if his mental train of thought had derailed. "You did too, I guess, but I mean..." I unconsciously grazed a thumb over the perma-dent that still encircled my ring finger, though the golden band had rested in my roll-top desk for at least a year now. Yeah, well, you're not missing much. Andy'll do it right, though, Pete said, the words stinging, but he meant nothing by it. And you didn't answer the question. He wagged a finger in my face. What about the old guy? Why would he do that? I asked the cops after the ambulance carted him off, but they wouldn't say anything about it. I put a hand on my thigh as if resting, but mashed down the ball of paper further. I got rear-ended once. Fender bender. We pulled over, called the cops, and literally never spoke a word. Easier on everyone that way, I suppose. Meaning, we'll probably never know, and I doubt they'll press charges for the cake. So it's done and done, it'd be my guess. Hours later, I offered some excuse, saying my son wanted to talk before he went to bed, and instead of drinking more free booze or filling up on the serving trays of dessert bites, I went back to the hotel. This effectively freed me to inspect that clump of paper. On one hand, I hoped for answers, which would either dispel other Lily or grind that sneer indelibly on my mind. But I might also find something boring, silly even. Directions to the venue, or a grocery list, for Christ's sake. Then I could drop $20 on a shitty in-room movie and call it a night. Maybe phone my son instead of only pretending to. Though his mom would instantly assume I was drunk and maudlin and probably refuse altogether. Even so, time to flip that coin. I pulled the papers from my pants, the wad so clumped by now it could have passed through a dryer cycle. Unfortunately, nothing was so damaged to be illegible. Though, if it had been, I guess I'd be a lot saner. But Andy would be a lot deader. 3 half sheets of paper, torn in half, not cut, and from what could only have been a dot matrix printer. Who the hell still used a dot matrix? You can't give those things away. The lack of pixel density made the images look like something from the newspapers I delivered as a kid. Headshots, of a sort. Nothing as dire as police station mugshots, but without notable backgrounds on half of them. Passport photos, maybe. The left of each half sheet featured a man about my age, on the wrong side of 30, but spring chickens compared with the old men on the other side. Behind these shots were backgrounds, but nothing telling. One looked like a bed, a deathbed if judging by the guy's age, another a wicker chair, and the other a study, maybe. Wait. The old man, I said. That last photo had to be him. If I could have seen his gnarled fingers, even in the pixelated grays and blacks of the printout, I'd have felt certain, but it was only waist up, the hands cut off in the framing. The dates beneath each picture told me nothing. Weren't birth dates, obviously. Could be date of death for the old-timers, since even those grainy pictures detailed their advanced ages. But then why was there a date under the Wedding Crashers pic? Other than a string of numbers of the last page. Another date? Only a phrase printed in a shaky hand ran across the upper left corner of the top sheet. Nox Honorum. What did that mean? I'd taken Russian in college, and this was clearly not Cyrillic. Nox like noxious? I recognized anno from a video game title, meaning in the year, but what the hell did that rum suffix mean? Maybe Andy would recognize these guys or had associated with them somehow. The last guy, across from the old man, looked familiar, but not enough to place him. Like staring at a jigsaw puzzle that was unwilling to surrender even a single match, my eyes began to cross and my head to droop. I had, after all, consumed an atypical amount of rich food and good booze, had gotten up at the crack of dawn to help the other groomsmen with prepping the venue and running last-minute errands. So, despite making no more sense of the crumpled papers at first glance, I was halfway to sleep in that chair when a knock at the door caused me to jerk awake. I sucked in a quick breath and slid the papers about, like I needed to hide them from what was no doubt Pete asking me to join him for one more drink down in the hotel bar, or the staff seeing if I needed anything. Pulling open the middle desk drawer revealed only a Gideon Bible, so I settled on sliding the sheets in there and shoving the drawer home before answering the door. Any idiot would have known who waited on the other side. When you mess in business not your own, you invite that business into your life, no matter your intent or innocence or preparedness. So yeah, that Lily's face slid into view as I pulled the door inward, clear and bright compared with what should have been Pete's glassy, vacant stare, I barely kept from yipping like a frightened dog. Her expression pulled inward into something like a sad clown face. "Oh no, I scared you," she said, and walked in as if invited. She'd changed into casual clothes, though her hair and makeup remained pristine from the ceremony. While I'd have expected it to grow shiny or start caking, or at least for several rogue hairs to break free in the hours since the service, Lily looked ready to go another nuptial round if need be. "No, you're fine," I said. "What's up?" "You left the party." Her eyes darted around the room, clearly cataloging. Nothing in that hotel room warranted even a cursory glance. So why did she look like she was about to hit me with an observational grenade worthy of Sherlock Holmes? Was she looking for the papers? Doubtful. No one had seen me pocket them. They'd all focused on the cake debacle. But then, even as I stared at that still perfect face, I saw the other Lily pass over its features, and I could envision those eyes dissembling my childish legerdemain without difficulty, only bringing it up now that the guests, witnesses, had dispersed. "I, had to call my son. Say goodnight." She nodded, finishing her sweep of the place. I swear her eyes caught on the desk drawer. Jesus, had I left it open, even a little? "I know you made sacrifices to join us," she said, again pulling the sad clown face. Why was the blood pumping in my ears, adrenaline causing me to rock back and forth, akin to the whopping 2 times in my life that I'd gotten into fights? She was all of $120 and stood a head shorter than me. But right then, if even a whiff of other Lily had replaced that stupid, sad clown expression, I'd have bolted into the lobby, socked feet and all, babbling like some 1950s damsel in a cheesy creature feature. "Oh, I don't mind," I managed. "Just glad to see Andy happy." Sad clown morphed into somber, scolding mother face. "And you know what makes Andy happy?" I shrugged, like my best friend since fucking grade school remained a total mystery. "Certainty, that's what. So I'd hate to jeopardize that." Again, her eyes darted to the desk, to the bureau, to my open suitcase on the floor. "Wouldn't you?" "Yes," I squeaked. "I mean, no, I wouldn't want to jeopardize his happiness." I bobbed my head, unconsciously looking for a mirror gesture from her, something to tell me she bought all this. Only a stolid expression came in return, and a bloated silence that dilated for several infinite seconds as some terrible math processed behind those eyes. "Good," she said at last, and turned for the door. "We're off to Mexico in the morning." The smile returned, the kind that said everything was A-OK. "You'll have your boy back in no time." My mouth hinged open in confusion. "No time at all." What happened the following night came care of Mexico's border policy, else I never could have followed the newlyweds. Turns out, crossing into Mexico required no identification at all, let alone a passport. Good thing, as all I had was a license and a bank card. The latter was enough to hire a driver who claimed she made the run from San Diego to Rosarito a couple times a day. Coming back would offer a challenge, but after Lily had left my room, her words echoing in my head at such volume as to feel audible in the quietude of that sterile space, I had no option but to follow on their heels, credentials be damned. I arrived midday with time to kill. The beach was nice. Not quite swimming weather, but several families who'd pitched tents up from the high tide line ventured into the chilly waters anyway. Vendors walked along, laden with wares, selling everything from meat on a stick to horchata. All I could manage was the water from my room and a pack of crackers from a nearby store selling tchotchkes. My appetite had yet to return, and, given the night's work ahead of me, seemed unlikely to do so any time soon. That night, sitting in the dark, after convincing a maid that I'd locked my card key in my room, my stomach gurgled and rolled, the only noise other than the bassy thump of music from the beachside bar downstairs. Though I sat in total darkness, I worried the sound would give me away whenever Lily and Andy returned to the room. My concern was unfounded, however, since I could hear them talking down the hallway, Andy barreling through the door as if blindfolded. Was he drunk? "I don't understand," he mumbled. He must have been drunk. He barely found the light switch and then flicked it a dozen times before relenting. Lily entered and switched on the lamp by the entrance instead, which kept me well hidden. So far, so good. "It's nothing," she said, words clear. Her body language betrayed none of Andy's languor. "I mean, it's not nothing. She's my sister. I have to go. But it's no big deal. We'll come back and stay as long as you like once I get everything settled. In the meantime, enjoy yourself. Do whatever you want. She can't take care of herself, so that only leaves me. I'm the oldest." "But it's our honeymoon," Andy whined. I'd tied one on with Andy 100 times over the years, and I'd never heard him slur his speech like that. He fell backward onto the bed, the air leaving him. "I've put all the names and numbers down." She held up a pad from the bedside table. "We'll talk as much as I can get away." "But I love you," Andy slurred, as if maneuvering around a swollen tongue, and then snores. And like that, other Lily manifested, as if she and Andy's attention were mutually exclusive. Forget my stomach. Now my heart doubled its rhythm, panic threatening to send me for the exit. She spit out a string of sounds in a language I'd never heard before, not so much as a millisecond pause between the syllables. From the folds of her clothes, she pulled a knife, sliced open Andy's shirt like a trauma surgeon, and sent the blade dancing lightly over his exposed skin. She slapped a hand on his midsection and then smeared a skim of blood across her face like war paint for what was to come. Was I already too late? In a panic, I barked, "Knox!" fear stealing my breath after a single word. She snapped her head in my direction and then dove for the other bedside lamp switch, limbing that terrible bloody mask. Nox Honorum, I said, barely getting it out. I held a makeshift shillelagh of wood I'd found on the beach, suddenly sapped of any confidence in my ability to wield it. Other Lily only smiled, the blood navigating down her lips and staining one side of her toothy grin. I knew it, she spat. My erstwhile husband told you about the Night of Years, did he? He should have told you to stay away. It is inevitable, boy. As inevitable as your failure to stop me. I've overcome far smarter and mightier obstacles than you these centuries. Just put down the knife, I said, voice empty. And I'll put down my stick, and we'll talk. Like a magic trick, she flipped the knife, caught the blade, and sent it sailing into the bedpost to my right. It stuck there so cleanly it seemed a feature of the bed, not even a splinter around where the blade had buried an inch deep. I yipped, and somehow her grin broadened further. We can talk, she said. I'm patient. Why Andy? He's a good guy. Never hurt anyone. She laughed, the sound akin to a hyena's giggle, not so much conveying mirth as the certainty of dominion, the indisputable claim to a kill. He's an only child, young, mobile, and disconnected. We're connected. She flicked her hand, discarding my emotions like one might shoo a fly. Real connections. Family, social, political. Hard to pull years from someone like that. Andy is easy. Within a week, I'd have him distancing himself from his friends, his job, the one parent he has left, so that when his bill came due, she made air quotes, death by natural causes, you'd be lucky to even hear about it. Just another old man passing away, never even an investigation. So why take off? I asked, pointing to the pad of paper. Since my latest ex crashed the party, I actually intended to pull only what I needed from Andy. He'd have lost a few years, enough for me to get by. But now that you've interfered, I'll just have to take the lot, you alongside. And your ex? She shrugged. Got more guts than I gave him credit for. I'd have pulled more had I known. Still, he won't last much longer. None of them do. She passed her tongue over her teeth, cleaning off the blood and leaving them gleaming. Neither will you. It took all I had to lock eyes with her, to keep from looking over her shoulder. I even pulled in a shaky breath and got out, well, before a cloth wrapped around her mouth, held by a set of gnarled fingers. In the movies, a rag soaked in chloroform knocks someone out in seconds, almost instantly. In real life, it takes longer, like half a minute. And in that time, Lily flailed like a cat in a bathtub. I went for her legs, only to get a sandaled foot to the face. After shaking off the stars in my vision, I dove and locked the appendages in place. She just moved on to scratching and biting, evoking a series of wails from the old man and opening up a nasty tear beneath my left earlobe. Finally, she fell limp, collapsing on me as the old man toppled to the floor as well. Not as jarring a plummet as when he'd slipped in the cake, but still bad enough to have him wheezing for breath. You see, the other string of numbers on that wad of paper hadn't been a date. It was a phone number. One I called after other Lily had left my room the previous night. Her ex was named Alan, and he told me about his own short marriage, pulling away from family and friends, followed by the Nox Honorum. The weeks after his new bride left him saw his youth, middle age, and even golden years eking away, as if caught in a time warp. I ran over to Andy, the image of that bloody print still stuck in my mind. But no, the cuts were superficial, mapping out some arcane series of runes as meaningless to me as her spate of words had been. I spun to find the old man upright again, grabbing Lily under the arms and dragging her toward the door, grunting like a constipated toddler. "What happens now?" I asked. He stopped long enough to gasp for breath, wiping a combination of sweat and blood from his wrinkled face. "Now you go home, though I'd wait till morning." "What will you do?" I asked. He smiled then, revealing a mouthful of yellowed teeth and exposed gums. "Lily and I are going to have a talk. Don't need your help with that." He grew serious, chest still heaving with breath. "You did a good thing, man," he said. Man, not young man, as if from a peer instead of an elder. And then he pulled her into the hall and shut the door. We were at the front desk the next morning, me calling my ex-wife and having her send pics of my expired passport amid sotto voce condemnations. Andy, near tears, staring at Lily's handwritten contact numbers, shaking his head, still incredulous that she'd left. The cuts on his stomach suggested he'd been drunk, fallen down, maybe broken some glass at the bar, perhaps contributing to her hasty departure. His worry only doubled once he'd called those numbers to discover they were fake. He'd try to find her, sure, but then eventually he'd face the truth. She'd gotten cold feet and taken off on him, disappeared into ether, as many newlyweds do. As I stood in the lobby, waiting for a ride to the consulate, a woman was wheeled by, strapped to a gurney, flesh so shriveled and frame so bony she could have passed for undead in some zombie flick. She writhed beneath her restraints, articulating hands that ended with stubs instead of fingers, mouth opening and closing, revealing an awful cavity instead of teeth and tongue. "What the hell?" I asked, revulsion running through me. An employee stopped and followed my gaze to that horror of a woman. "Didn't you hear?" he asked. "They found her in some old guy's room on the 3rd floor, all cut up like that. The cops have been here all morning." "Jesus," was all I managed, imagination wheeling. "People saw the guy, though. They'll find him. Guy that age can't get too far, right?" But I thought of that ball of papers, the images flanking each side of those sheets. I didn't know what it took for Alan to make other Lily relinquish his lost years, but the man I'd seen opposite his withered picture could breeze right on by without a sideways glance. Could have as easily been me or Andy. And just as Alan had recaptured his life, Lily's was over now. Even if she could communicate without fingers or tongue, who would believe an old woman raving about eternal youth? Not me. Not you, either.
Well, I do. Stranger things have happened, right? I really enjoyed the narrative voice in this story, didn't you? There is a comedic element to it that makes it an enjoyable listen. It was quite easy for me to imagine this story reinterpreted on the silver screen as a buddy horror comedy. Who do you think would be the perfect casting? We need someone for all 3 core best friends. We need an older actor to play Alan, And of course, a leading lady to play our Black Widow villainess, Lily. Let me know your casting choices in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, please check out more of Darren's work in the description. You can also find a playlist with more of his stories appearing on your screen shortly. Before you jump to the next captivating yarn, won't you leave a like on this video and subscribe to hear more stories like this one? Whatever you do, don't do it too hastily, especially not matters of the heart. And don't fall asleep.